Hi guys, welcome back to the Hugh Jeffries video, and in today's video we're taking a look at a $50 boxed eMac. Now you're probably wondering why I'm standing outside, and that's because I've actually got to go pick this thing up. I didn't order this online, I found this up on Gumtree for $50, and I wouldn't have usually got an eMac, but considering it has an original box and all the original accessories, I thought this was an epic deal I couldn't miss. So right now, I'm on holidays and I'm heading home today. So on the way home, I'm going to be hauling back this eMac. So without further ado, let's jump in the car and pick up this eMac. So now that I'm back in the studio, we can take a look at this eMac. From the box, apparently it's an 800 MHz PowerPC G4 eMac with 128 MB of RAM and a 40 GB hard drive. Before I take it out of the box, I want to have a look at the packaging itself. You can see it has satin on the side of it, and on the back you'll find a picture of a molecule, and on the other side there's a picture of a flower. And you might be thinking that's an odd choice for packaging of a computer. Well, eMac actually stands for Education Mac, and most of these were sold to schools and universities. But from what I know, these were also sold to the public later on due to high demand. They were sort of an entry-level Mac of the time. In the box itself, there is the Apple Pro mouse, which is looking quite disgusting. There's a Apple Pro keyboard above that, which has yellowed and is needing a very good clean, as that is absolutely filthy. And last but not least in the box is this packet, which contains all of the discs for the eMac when you need to restore the software on the device. Taking out the big bit of foam, I can lift up this 26 kilo beast and place it on the table. Even though I transported this Mac home in the car in its original packaging, it seems to have got moisture on the screen from my journeys home. It's absolutely freezing outside and was pouring rain, so that was never a good sign. Either way though, I cleaned that off, and now that we actually have it out of the box, we can take a look at the condition of the eMac. From first glances, this thing looks in really good condition and doesn't seem to have any marks or scratches anywhere, although it probably could do with a bit of a clean. As you can see by the power button, the amount of grime and dirt that's accumulated on there. The keyboard and mouse, however, have seen better days. The keyboard has yellowed over time from its original white color, and the mouse is disgusting. It's full of dirt and grime. The back of the eMac is extremely dusty from years of use, and it doesn't look like it has ever been cleaned. And it can be said that the eMac has been sitting in its box for a number of years, and the power cable was still connected, which has resulted in this horrific bend in it, although it does work just fine. Connecting up the power cable and a keyboard and mouse, we can give this eMac a first test. The first initial clunking sound is something to do with the CRT monitor, which, if you're curious, runs at 29,000 volts. That scares me every time I turn on the computer and makes me jump. Booting it up for the first time, it has obviously been reset to factory settings, as I'm greeted with an intro video, which greets me with the welcome screen, and from there I can set up my user account and get into Mac OS X. And given the fact that this computer is coming up to 16 years old, the PRAM battery which keeps the date and time is completely dead, so I'll need to fix that up later in the video. Either way, now that I've set it up, we can boot into a fresh install of macOS 10.2. And if you're wondering why the screen is flickering, that is purely only my camera picking that up and not an issue with the computer itself. However, it is now time to fix up this Mac by giving it a good clean and replacing that PRAM battery so I can keep the date and time. I'm going to be starting with the keyboard. Now this should actually get its own separate video in the near future. As you can tell, it is completely yellowed, and with a little remedy called Retro Bright, and its aim is to restore the keycaps of the keyboard back to the white coloring, and it does this by some chemical reaction, and you leave the keycaps out in the sun. Either way though, I'll post about that in the near future, so stick around for that video. But for today, I'm just going to be cleaning the keyboard to the best of my abilities, although it won't be 100% perfect, but I'll worry about that later on. The mouse, however, is pretty much uncleanable. given the dirt is actually underneath the moving part of the button and I can't get anything in there to clean it. I've tried literally everything I can think of, but if you have an idea yourself, leave a comment down below. I also need to clean up some of the cords for the keyboard and mouse and bring them back to brand new looking condition. Of course, we can't forget the most important part, which is the eMac itself. Now, I started by using some cleaning alcohol, just rubbing around and cleaning up pretty much everything on the exterior of the eMac. This included the sides, the top, the back, and of course that grimy looking power button. But cleaning the outside really just wasn't going to cut it, so it was time to open up the eMac and do a little bit of internal cleaning and repairs to get this thing back up and running. The first thing I'm going to do is remove the old PRAM battery, which is completely dead and isn't holding any date and time, and then I can start to remove the screws on the outer perimeter as well as on the bottom of the eMac. There's only a few screws holding this plastic shell in place, and once they're removed, I can begin lifting up on the back housing, making sure to disconnect the power button before completely removing the back. Now, it should be noted that the CRT in this runs at 29,000 volts, so it's very important to let it discharge before opening the eMac. I waited over 24 hours before opening my eMac, and now that I have it open, you can see that there's a dead spider and a heap of dust absolutely everywhere inside of this. Now, for anyone out there with a vintage Mac that's older than say 10 to 15 years, I highly recommend opening it up, taking out the PRAM battery and replacing it, as well as giving the insides a good clean. Of course, you want to be extremely careful in doing this if it has a CRT monitor. Now, the first thing I'll need to do is remove that spider that's obviously been dead for a very long time. Then I can come in with a wet cloth and clean up the fan inside of this computer, and that automatically makes this thing look so much cleaner. Although I will go around and get as much dust out of here as I can without completely disassembling the device. There's also a lot inside the plastic shell, so I'm going to do my best at removing those with an alcohol wipe. It won't be 100% perfect, but it's going to be a lot better than it was before. Now, a part of the computer I just couldn't get all the dust out was the back vent. I'm not sure if there's a way to remove it, but there's some dust stuck in there that I didn't feel like trying to wash it under the tap, so I'll leave that for another day. But either way, like I said, this is looking a lot better than it did before. I can reinstall these screws around the perimeter and on the bottom, and taking a look at this old PRAM battery, you can see it was manufactured in May of 2003. Using my multimeter, you can see it has a voltage of 0.43 and the new battery has a voltage of 3.67 volts. So a lot more voltage and a lot more charge in that new battery. So that is going to keep the date and time for this eMac. You can also see the RAM slots above there. Now this supports up to 1 gigabyte of RAM, but I didn't have any laying around that was actually compatible in this computer, but I will purchase some and max this thing out at 1 gig of RAM. Now, if you remember this little packet that was in the box, this actually contains all of the DVD media for the eMac, like the Mac OS X installed DVD 1 and 2, as well as the software restore for Mac OS 9, as well as the applications for both Mac OS 9 and Mac OS X, and of course an Apple hardware test. I can install one of the Mac OS 9 CDs, and opening this in Mac OS 10 will open an installer, and installing the software will install Mac OS 9 as well as some additional apps and games for Mac OS 10. You can restart into Mac OS 9.2 and take a look at just how different this looks and the sounds. And to actually switch between Mac OS 9 and Mac OS 10, you just do it through System Preferences or the Control Panel in Mac OS 9 and select the different startup disk. You should also be surprised that this thing actually contains a microphone Just take a listen to the sound quality. Hello, this is a test coming from the eMac computer from 2003, and I did this yesterday and took a listen to the audio coming out of it, and honestly, I believe this audio sounds better than the microphones in some of the newer MacBook Pro laptops. They seem to be very tinny and contain no bass. This actually sounds quite decent, even considering its age, given this computer was released in 2003. Not too bad, hey? And finally, comparing the eMac to the iMac of the same time in 2003, you can see the difference between the CRT display of the eMac and the LCD screen of the iMac G4. Personally, I love the iMac G4 design with its floating LCD, which can be rotated in any different number of directions. Fun fact is that the eMac was the last ever Apple computer to ship with a CRT display. And apologies again for the CRT flickering seen in this video. It's unavoidable, and although isn't visible to the human eye, the camera picks it up, and unfortunately there was nothing I could do to avoid it. And on that note, this has been a Hugh Jeffries video. If you like what you saw, hit that subscribe button and consider checking out my vintage computer playlist for more videos just like this one. Also, make sure to follow me on my social media, link for which is down in the description. That's all for this video, and I'll catch you guys next time.